There I was standing in that cold, sterile courtroom, fighting back tears as my ex-husband's lawyer ripped into me like I was nothing. She's broke. She can't even afford a decent home or proper food and clothes for those kids. She sneered, her smirk cutting deeper than her words. Why on earth should she keep them? My jaw clenched so tight it ached, but I stayed silent. My hands, they were trembling like leaves in a storm. I refused to let them see me crumble. Oh, no way would I give them that satisfaction. The judge just nodded, slow and deliberate, like he was already siding with them. Can you imagine that feeling? It was like the air got sucked right out of my chest, leaving me gasping inside. All I could think about were my babies, Luca and Arya. What would happen if they were torn from me and handed to Derek, a man obsessed with control and appearances? I couldn't afford a fancy lawyer like his. No way. Truth is, I could barely afford anything. I was hanging on by a thread, scraping by, but I was there. Wasn't I? I showed up, pouring every ounce of myself into fighting for my kids. Just when that quiet panic started creeping in, you know, the kind where your body's still but your mind's screaming, my 7-year-old son Luca stood up. Mom, he called out, his voice echoing through the courtroom. Can I show the judge the letter I found in Dad's safe? The room froze. Every head turned. Derek went stiff as a board, his lawyer blinked like she'd just been slapped, and even the judge stopped mid-sentence. A letter? What letter? My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Luca had never mentioned anything about a letter, but I nodded, trusting him. As he marched toward the bench, that tiny folded paper clutched in his small hand, everything shifted. Oh, how that moment changed it all. I wasn't always this woman trembling in a courtroom, afraid to speak. Once I was confident with a job I loved and friends who filled my life with laughter. I had dreams, big, vibrant dreams that felt so real. But then I married Derek and things changed. Slowly at first, then all at once. He wasn't always cruel, you know. In the beginning, he was charming, generous, the kind of man who could convince you the sky was green. He'd say, you don't need to work, sweetheart. Stay home, raise the kids. Let me handle the money. Once he even told me, you've done enough. You deserve rest. How could I have known what I was giving up? My independence, my voice, my safety net, all gone. I became invisible in my own life. After Arya was born, Derek changed even more. He was always tired, always critical. Every penny I spent was a battle. If I bought diapers without checking for a sale, he'd freeze me out for hours. Dare to mention part-time work. He'd snap, you don't have a recent resume. Or worse, we don't need your help. We need you to be a good mom. By the time he walked out, I had nothing. No savings, no lawyer, no one in my corner except Luca and Arya. He drained our joint account, moved in with someone new, and hired a hotshot lawyer faster than you can blink. Me, I couldn't even afford one. I dragged myself to the free legal clinic at the county courthouse, standing in line for 2 hours, clutching a folder, stuffed with receipts and photos of my kids, eating boxed macaroni off paper towels because we didn't have clean dishes. Our apartment was tiny, barely enough space to breathe. I worked 2 under-the-table cleaning jobs just to keep the rent paid. No cable, no internet, just a prepaid phone. I prayed wouldn't run out of minutes if the school called. Sometimes I washed the kids' clothes by hand in the bathtub. The water heater so useless I'd boil water on the stove and mix it in buckets. Luca never complained, not once. Arya, she'd hum little songs, while I scrubbed her socks, her sweet voice keeping me going. I didn't tell a soul how bad it got, not even my mom. I was too ashamed. She'd warned me about Derek years ago, said he treated people like transactions. But I was too in love to listen. Oh, how I wish I had. When the court date loomed, terror gripped me. Derek filed for full custody, claiming I was unfit, unstable, poor, incapable of giving the kids a good life. His lawyer, Carla Dane, was brutal, wielding spreadsheets and photos of his picture-perfect home like weapons. They strutted in with expensive suits, smirking like the case was already won. Me, I walked in wearing a borrowed dress, a hand-me-down blazer, and carrying a plastic folder with school records, attendance sheets, and a letter from our landlord proving I'd never missed a rent payment. It wasn't enough, I knew it, but I had to try for Luca, for Arya. That morning, Luca held my hand as we climbed the courthouse steps. Is it going to be okay, Mom? He asked, his eyes so big and trusting. I forced a smile, but it felt so thin. Yes, baby, it's going to be okay. But was it? I wasn't sure of anything except how much I love my kids. I knew what it meant to go without, to put them first even when I had nothing. I knew the ache of crying in the bathroom after bedtime so they wouldn't see. I knew how hard I fought to make their world feel safe when everything was crumbling. In that courtroom, I sat tall, still watching Derek dodge my gaze. Carla listed everything I lacked: money-stable housing, reliable transportation. Her son wears secondhand shoes with holes, she declared. Her daughter's teacher says she sometimes skips breakfast. This isn't neglect, it's poverty. And poverty is a risk, I wanted to scream. Where was she when I skipped dinner to save cereal for them? Where was she when I sold my wedding ring for winter coats? But I stayed silent. In court, anger looks like instability, not strength. The judge nodded and my heart sank. Was this it? Just when I thought I couldn't hold on, I felt a tug on my sleeve. Luca, my brave little boy, looked up with those wide eyes. "Mom, can I say something to the judge?" he whispered. The room grew colder as Carla spoke again, her confidence oozing like she'd won 100 cases like this. She painted my life as a failure stripped of truth, meant to shame me. No stable employment, inconsistent financial assistance, temporary housing. The children deserve better than a mother who can barely feed them, she said. I didn't look at Derek. I didn't need to. I could picture his blank, smug face acting like he hadn't orchestrated my ruin. He drained our account before leaving. He refused to help with bills unless it made him look good. But in that room, all the judge saw were Derek's glossy photos, his pristine house, stocked fridge, private school brochures. Carla waved my bank statements like they were trash. Your Honor, my client offers a secure environment, rooms for the kids, regular meals, a nanny, Ms. Morrow, no income, no employer behind, on utilities, a late rent warning in February. This isn't safe for two young children. My face burned. She didn't mention the countless houses I cleaned for cash, the rent notice I fixed in days, or the valuables I sold to keep food on the table. The judge leaned back, staring at his papers like they confirmed I was failing. Trying wasn't enough, was it? I wanted to explain, to fight, but I'd been warned: don't interrupt, don't seem defensive, don't cry too much or seem too cold. So I sat silent, shame and frustration boiling inside. My fingers gripped the seat as I glanced at my kids. Arya doodled with a dull crayon. Luca watched Derek with narrowed eyes. Then Carla's words hit like a knife. Why should she get the children if she can't even afford to care for them? Why should I? The question echoed, tearing at me. I fought back tears, knowing my reality didn't shine on paper. No new clothes, no fancy lunches, no ballet classes. But I was there. I brushed their hair, checked for monsters under their beds, sewed patches into their jackets when I couldn't buy new ones. Didn't that count? The judge's doubtful gaze met mine, his mouth opening to speak when Luca tugged my arm again. Mom, can I show the judge the letter I found in Dad's safe? My stomach dropped. What letter? I whispered, confused. He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket, holding it up. Derek sat up straighter. Carla's eyes locked on it. Luca, what is that? I asked softly. He ignored me, facing the judge. Can I give this to you? The judge nodded, surprised. Bring it here. Luca walked forward, small but steady, past the polished suits and staring eyes, handing the letter over with both hands. Silence swallowed the room. Derek was sweating now. Carla whispered to him, her confidence cracking. The judge unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the words. His face shifted: confusion, realization, then something sharp. Mr. Morrow, he said, voice like steel, care to explain this. Oh, how the air changed. Derek's eyes widened. His mouth opened, but no words came. Carla's urgent whispers grew sharp. The judge held the letter, tightly rereading it, brow furrowed. Then he read aloud, to Derek Marrow, from L. Becker, CPA, subject, Strategic Financial Shielding, Divorce Prep. Dated 3 months before your divorce filing, it outlines opening offshore accounts, transferring assets to shell LLCs, and minimizing income to sway custody and support proceedings. He paused, glaring at Derek. It says keep primary custody if possible, but ensure she has little ground for appeal by appearing financially stable and morally sound. The courtroom's silence was deafening. Every eye burned into Derek. Even Carla looked stunned, whispering, is this real? I was frozen, caught between disbelief and a quiet burning rage. I'd suspected Derek's ruthlessness, but this, in writing, read aloud before my kids, unimaginable. The judge set the letter down, his voice cutting through. You've misled this court, Mr. Marrow. You've manipulated these proceedings with financial deception to deny your children their mother. Derek shot up. That letter's old, it wasn't used. Sit down, the judge snapped, his voice booming. Arya grabbed my hand. I held her, close eyes locked on the judge. Ms. Morrow, did you know about this letter, he asked. No, Your Honor, I said, throat tight. First I've heard of it. And your son found it. I nodded. Yes, he never mentioned it until now. Luca looked up. I thought it might help, he said softly. I found it looking for my tablet at Dad's. I didn't want us to lose. The judge's gaze softened. You did right, young man. To Carla, he said, I'm pausing this hearing for a formal inquiry into Mr. Morrow's financial conduct. Primary custody stays with Ms. Morrow. The defendant's parenting time is suspended until resolved. The words hit slowly like a dream. My knees shook as I sank down, pulling Luca and Arya into my arms. Carla stood silent, defeated. Derek said nothing. The judge left, the bailiff dismissed us, and I sat clinging to my kids like they were my anchor. Luca whispered, Did I mess up, no baby? I said, tears welling. You saved us, he nodded, silent, and I saw the weight he'd carried. The fight wasn't over, but truth had a chance now. Outside, the cold air hit us. Luca zipped Arya's coat, and gratitude overwhelmed me. How do you thank a child for such courage? Days later, a court-appointed investigator, Miss Trent, reviewed the letter, asked about our marriage finances, and dug into Derek's records. I had nothing to hide. Derek did. Within a week, his lies unraveled: shell companies, overseas transfers, hidden income. Each update rebuilt my trust in myself. For so long, Derek made me feel weak, paranoid. Now facts proved me right. At the final hearing, I walked in taller with a lawyer from a domestic support group wearing a modest black dress I'd saved for. Derek's confidence was gone. His new lawyer spoke tersely. The judge began. We found substantial evidence of Mr. Morrow's willful non-disclosure and manipulation against the children's best interests. To me, he said, Ms. Morrow, for your commitment under hardship, you're granted full custody of Luca and Arya. Mr. Morrow will pay backdated support and face monitored visitation. I didn't cry, not yet. I braced for a twist, but none came. The gavel fell. It was real, Arya squealed, hugging me. Luca squeezed my hand, his eyes steady. That night we ate pancakes, danced to the radio in our tiny kitchen, laughing until it filled every corner. Later I held them on the floor. Arya sang. Luca drew a house with 3 stick figures writing, Home is where Mom is. That letter, a lifeline to peace. Luca could have hidden it, but at 7 he knew right from wrong and spoke when no adult did. 6 months later, I still think of that day, not just the ruling, but the love that carried us. Life isn't perfect. I work long hours, budget, tightly buy secondhand clothes, but the fear gone. Derek tried to dodge support payments, but the court held firm. He visited 3 times, then stopped. I told the kids he wasn't ready to show up, and they deserved better. They stopped asking. Luca once asked, was I in trouble for taking the letter? No, baby, I said. You were so brave. He leaned on my shoulder, and I saw the burden he'd carried. Counseling helped me admit how bad it was, shedding the shame of poverty. I wasn't weak. I was strong, for surviving, for showing up, for loving my kids every day. I found a part-time office job with benefits, bought a laptop for online bookkeeping classes. Arya made a preschool friend, grew confident. Luca's art club, drawing a tree with deep roots labeled Growing, said it all. We're growing steady and sure, moving toward peace. People ask how I stayed calm in court. I almost didn't. But when your babies are at stake, you keep standing. Giving up, never an option. This story began with me accused of being too poor to mother. It ended with a child's truth proving love's power. We won with honesty, kindness, and refusal to break. Justice came carried in a boy's hand, offered with love. That day I stopped surviving and started living. If this moves you, share it. Comment your story, parent, survivor, or believer in truth. Your voice matters. Then Carla Dane hurled the words that stabbed deeper than any insult she'd thrown. Why should she get the children if she can't even afford to care for them? Oh, how those words echoed in my mind, tearing at my heart. Why should I get them? The question burned, and I fought back the tears, pressing hard behind my eyes. My reality wasn't pretty on paper, was it? No new clothes for Luca and Arya, no fancy lunches, no ballet classes to show off. But I was there every single night. I brushed their hair, chased away monsters under their beds, and stayed up late. my fingers aching as I hand-sewed patches into their jackets because new ones were out of reach. Did that count for nothing? In that courtroom, only numbers seemed to matter. Numbers I didn't have. The judge's gaze landed on me, heavy with doubt, his eyes narrowing like he'd already made up his mind. He opened his mouth ready to speak when I felt that small, urgent tug on my sleeve. Luca. My brave little boy whispered, "Mom, can I show the judge the letter I found in Dad's safe?" A letter. What was he talking about? I stared at him, my heart racing, confusion swirling. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket and held it up, and my stomach churned. What was this? I didn't know what it was, but something shifted. Derek sat up straighter, tense like a cornered animal. Carla's eyes locked onto that paper, her confidence flickering. "Luca, what is that?" I asked softly, my voice barely steady. He didn't answer me. His gaze was fixed on the judge. "Can I give this to you?" he asked, so small yet so sure. The judge, surprised, nodded. "Bring it here." Luca stepped forward, steady as a soldier, his tiny frame moving past the row of polished suits and wide-eyed stares. He handed the letter to the judge with both hands, and the room fell into a heavy, eerie silence. Derek was sweating now, actually sweating. Carla leaned toward him, whispering fast, her cool facade cracking for the first time. Oh, what was happening? The judge unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the words. His face changed, confusion, then realization, then something sharp like anger. He looked straight at Derek. "Mr. Marrow," he said, his voice cutting like a blade cared to explain this. The air in the courtroom shifted, charged with tension. Derek's eyes widened, his mouth opened, but no words came out. Carla whispered again, her voice sharp with urgency. Whatever was on that paper, it had rattled them both. I leaned forward, my heart hammering so loud I could barely think, trying to read the judge's face. He held the letter tightly, rereading it, his brow furrowed deep. Then he read aloud, his voice steady but laced with disbelief. To Derek Morrow, from Elbecker CPA, subject Strategic Financial Shielding Divorce Prep. He paused, glancing at the courtroom, then back at Derek. This letter, dated 3 months before your divorce was filed, outlines instructions for opening offshore accounts, transferring assets to shell LLCs, and minimizing reported income to influence custody and support proceedings. It says, quote, "Keep primary custody if possible, but ensure she has little ground for appeal by appearing financially stable and morally sound." He stopped, and the silence wasn't just quiet, it was suffocating. Every eye in the room burned into Derek. Even Carla looked stunned, turning slowly to him, whispering, "Is this real?" I couldn't move, frozen between shock and a quiet, seething rage I couldn't release. I'd suspected Derek's cold, calculating ways, but this, in black and white, read aloud before my children. Unbelievable. The judge lowered the letter, placing it neatly on the bench, his eyes locking onto Derek. "You've intentionally misled this court," he declared. "You've manipulated these proceedings with financial deception to deny your children their mother." Derek shot to his feet, desperate. "That letter's old. It wasn't used. It's not even." "Sit down, Mr. Morrow," the judge snapped, his voice booming, startling everyone. Arya looked up from her drawing, grabbing my hand, and I wrapped my arm around her, my eyes glued to the judge. "Ms. Morrow, did you know about this letter before today?" he asked. "No, Your Honor." I said, my throat so tight I could barely speak. "This is the first I've heard of it, and your son found it." I nodded, emotion choking me. "Yes, he never mentioned it until now." Luca looked up, his eyes wide but steady. "I thought it might help," he said softly. "I found it looking for my tablet at Dad's house. I didn't want to get anyone in trouble, but I didn't want us to lose." The judge stared at him, long and thoughtful. Then something softened in his face. "You did the right thing, young man," he said, his voice warm. To Carla, he turned all business again. "I'm reviewing this document in full and pausing this hearing for a formal inquiry into Mr. Morrow's financial conduct. In the meantime, primary custody remains with Ms. Morrow, with temporary suspension of the defendant's parenting time until this is resolved." Those words hit like a wave, slow to sink in. Had I heard right? My body didn't react at first, like my brain needed to double-check I wasn't dreaming. When it hit, my knees buckled, I sank down, pulling Luca and Arya into my arms, holding them tight. Carla stood silent, lips pressed tight, arms folded, no fight left in her. Derek, not a word. The judge left the bailiff, dismissed us, and I stayed seated, clinging to my kids like they were my lifeline to the earth. Luca leaned in, whispering, "Did I mess up? No, baby," I said, tears brimming. "You saved us." He nodded once, quiet, and I saw the weight he'd carried, my brave boy. I realized the fight wasn't over, but for the first time, truth had a fighting chance. Oh, what a moment. I walked out of that courtroom gripping Luca in Arya's hands, my feet moving, but my mind spinning. I kept replaying the judge's words had he really stopped the hearing. Suspended Derek's time. Seen the truth. The cold air outside snapped me back as Luca let go to zip Arya's coat. Gratitude flooded me. How do you thank a child for such courage? Days later, a court-appointed investigator, Ms. Trent, met with me. She listened, took notes, never once making me feel small. She reviewed the letter, asked about our marriage finances, and requested tax records and asset disclosures. I agreed instantly. I had nothing to hide, Derek. Not so much. Within a week, his lies unraveled. Shell companies in Nevada and Delaware, secret wire transfers, undisclosed cash, deals, tax inconsistencies, screaming he'd hidden income for years. Each update rebuilt something in me. Trust in my memory, confidence in my gut, hope that justice might actually exist. Derek had made me feel weak, paranoid, like I was imagining his control. But now the facts were shouting the truth. The final hearing came fast. I walked in taller with a lawyer from a domestic support group wearing a modest black dress and sturdy heels I'd saved for small victories, but they felt like armor. Derek looked deflated, his new lawyer's words short and tense, no smirks or smug glances. The judge began. This court has reviewed Mr. Morrow's financial investigation and found substantial evidence of willful non-disclosure, asset concealment, and income manipulation to gain an advantage here. My heart soared. He looked at me. Ms. Morrow, for your commitment to your children's well-being, under hardship, you're granted full physical and legal custody of Luca and Arya. Mr. Morrow will pay backdated support and face monitored visitation pending review. I didn't cry, not yet. Part of me braced for a catch, but none came. The gavel fell, and it was real. Arya squealed, hugging my waist. Luca squeezed my hand, his eyes shining. That night we ate pancakes, danced to the radio in our tiny kitchen, laughing until joy filled every corner. Luca drew a house with 3 stick figures writing, "Home is where Mom is." That letter. It was our lifeline, proof that even a child's courage can change everything. The judge's voice thundered. This behavior directly contradicts the best interests of the children involved. He paused, his gaze locking on to me, steady and sure. Ms. Morrow, in light of these findings and your unwavering commitment to your children's well-being, despite such hardship, this court grants you full physical and legal custody of Luca and Arya. Mr. Morrow is ordered to pay backdated child support and will face monitored visitation pending further review. Can you believe it? My heart stopped. I didn't cry, not yet. Part of me braced for a twist, waiting for someone to shout, mistake, or unravel it all. But silence held. The judge signed the order. The gavel fell, bam, and it was real. Arya let out a quiet squeal, wrapping her arms around my waist, her warmth grounding me. Luca squeezed my hand, his face serious, but his eyes shining steady like he knew we'd won. That night we celebrated with pancakes for dinner. Oh, how they loved those fluffy stacks, and danced to crackly radio tunes in our tiny kitchen. Laughter spilled out, filling every corner of our cramped apartment. I sank to the floor afterward, pulling both kids onto my lap. Arya sang a silly tune, her voice like a melody of hope. Luca scribbled on a notepad, and when I peeked, my breath caught. He'd drawn a house with 3 stick figures scrawling above it. Home is where Mom is. That letter he found. It wasn't just evidence, it was our lifeline. A doorway from fear to peace. Can you imagine? Luca could have hidden that paper, tossed it, ignored it. But at 7 years old, my son knew right from wrong. In a courtroom packed with adults, he was the only one brave enough to speak the truth. 6 months later, I still replay that day. Not just the judge's ruling or Derek's stunned face, but the quiet strength it took to get there. Strength born of love, not money or power, the kind that keeps you going when everything else is gone. Life didn't turn perfect after the ruling. I still worked grueling hours, budgeted every grocery trip to the last cent, hunted for secondhand clothes, clipped coupons, and said no to things other families take for granted. But the fear gone. That suffocating dread that someone might snatch my kids away. Over Derek tried to claw back control, filing a motion to cut his support payments, then whining about the monitored visitation rules. But the evidence was ironclad, and the court didn't budge. He showed up to 3 visitations, then quit. I kept it simple for the kids. Your dad's not ready to be consistent, and you deserve people who show up. They stopped asking about him, and my heart ached, but also lifted. They were okay. Luca still mentions the letter sometimes. One evening, curled up on our worn couch, he asked, "Was I in trouble for taking it?" I shook my head, looking into his earnest eyes. "No, baby. You were so brave you told the truth when it mattered most." He nodded, leaning his head on my shoulder, and I saw the invisible weight he'd carried. That boy held on to that paper for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to act, choosing justice when no one asked him to. I started counseling, and let me tell you, it felt so strange, at first spilling out how bad things had been, but healing needs air. The more I talked, the more I saw how I'd swallowed the shame, the guilt, the lie that being poor meant I was failing my kids. I thought I had to look okay to prove my worth, but my counselor showed me the truth. I wasn't weak for struggling. I was strong for surviving, strong for keeping a roof over our heads, for facing court, without a lawyer, for putting Luca Motor first every day. One weekend, I landed a part-time office job with benefits, nothing glamorous but steady. I took it heart-pounding with hope. I bought a laptop, juggling pennies to take online evening classes for a bookkeeping certification. I'd always been good with numbers, but never believed I could make it a career. The kids started thriving too. Aria made a best friend at preschool, her teacher noting how chatty and confident she'd become. Luca joined the school art club, and one of his drawings, a tree with thick, deep roots, hung proudly in the hallway, labeled with one word: growing. That's us now, growing. It's not always fast or easy, but it's steady. Each week we edge closer to peace, further from fear. People ask how I stayed calm in court, how I didn't collapse. Truth is, I nearly did. But when your babies are on the line, you find a way to keep breathing. Keep standing, not because it's easy, but because giving up isn't an option. This story began with me accused of being too poor to mother. It ended with a child's voice, the smallest in the room, proving what love looks like, unafraid to stand tall. We didn't win with power, money, or perfect looks. We won with honesty, kindness, and a refusal to break. Justice isn't always easy, but it comes sometimes in a folded letter, held by a little boy's courageous hands, offered with love. That day changed everything, not just legally, but in my heart. It was the day I stopped merely surviving and started living. If this story stirs you, if it echoes the quiet strength it takes to push on against all odds, please like this video. Share it with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Drop a comment, parent, survivor, or believer in truth. Your voice matters. I read everyone. For more stories of resilience, love, and fighting for what counts, subscribe. We're building a community that sees people, not just struggles. Thank you for being here.